Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore in 1903 had lamented that in the history of India, written by the Britishers, India has been reduced and Indians have been reduced to dust and storm. More than 100 years after Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore's words, well, it seems constructive steps are being taken to address his concerns. Hello and welcome to this video. I am Bhuvan Apurvajha for Study IQ as we seek to understand the demand made by India as newspaper reports and media reports in British press seem to indicate that India is going to stake its claim for all the artifacts that lie in the museums and private collections of Great Britain. The news that is developing right now that India will be forcing Britain into colonial reckoning with treasure demands, the government now targeting crown jewels and museum artifacts that lie and which will be dwarfing Greece's attempts to reclaim the Elgin marbles. Moving straight forward into the topic, India is expected to wage a diplomatic campaign to reclaim the Koh-i-Noor, along with 1,000 of other treasures that lie in British museums and private collections across Great Britain. The newspaper report indicates that India's ministerial and diplomatic staff will be mobilized to secure the return of potentially thousands of artifacts that have been lodged in the museums of Great Britain since independence. Now, what's the ultimate goal here? Well, the ultimate goal indeed is to secure the return of the Kohinoor. Indeed, it's a very complex issue which that we'll look to address in this video. But first, to understand, well, it's often said, what's the one thing in the British Museum that does not feel British at all? And well, it's often said that it's the contents of the museum. At the same time, someone else might remark that, well, why aren't the pyramids in British museums? Well, probably because they were too big and heavy to move. Indeed, in fact, British Museum is a treasure trove of artifacts, of treasures from across the world, an indication and an evidence of the colonial power's fading power, the colonial institutions' fading power. So, the officials in New Delhi will be coordinating a separate push for the return of the artifacts taken during British rule. Now, what's the standing of the Indian government? Well, the Indian government says that they were taken unethically and removed in a state of colonial coercion. So we'll understand the realms, the whole perspective that the Indian government is taking insofar as taking its claim for these particular artifacts in British museums is concerned. However, the India's vision for repatriation of artifacts, including from institutions that require royal permission, will be a diplomatic challenge not just for India, but also for the United Kingdom, especially with their Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, having been termed as a living bridge by the Indian government between Indians and the United Kingdom. At the same time, he will have to negotiate difficult waters both at home and abroad, especially when you see it in the context of the impending India-UK trade deal. Moving forward, first, let's try and understand what is the Kohinoor. What is the hype about Kohinoor? Kohinoor that traces its origin to the Kollur mine near Golconda Fort in present-day Andhra Pradesh is one of the largest cut diamonds in the world. Currently set in the crown of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and she had adorned this crown and she had worn this crown during King George's VI's coronation that took place in 1937. This photo is exactly the crown of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Now, Kohinoor has changed hands throughout history, throughout its very origin. However, the first instance that we can essentially recall is when Nadir Shah raided Delhi and took along with him three important things. What were they? Number one, the Kohinoor. Number two, the Darya-e-Noor. And number three, the Peacock Throne. The lavish, the regal peacock throne of the Mughal Sultanate. This indeed is a representation of the peacock throne. Now the diamond changed hands several times after that until being handed over to Queen Victoria after the British East India Company's annexation of Punjab, the Treaty of Lahore as it was signed, essentially sealed the fate of the Kohinoor. As of today, the diamond is on public display in the Jewel House at the Tower of London. And just to go back to the recent past, there was a lot of hue and cry as to whether Queen Camilla would be wearing the Kohinoor during the coronation of King Charles. That didn't happen. A diplomatic fracas was averted, but eventually, in the long run, the question still stands. Will India be getting back its Kohinoor, or will British, you know how it's going to work out. They're not going to be very easy handing over the Kohinoor to us. So what are the situations, what are the different factors at play? We'll be understanding and assessing all of that. Going forward, now the British Museum is expected to face claims from its collection of Hindu statues and the Amravati marbles. Now please understand that Kohinoor is not just, this whole campaign is not just about Kohinoor, it's about the different artifacts too. So Amravati marbles catches our attention straight up. Now the story behind Amravati marbles is that this gentleman, Sir Walter Elliot, he is the one who eventually chanced upon these marbles, got them transported to Madras, and he eventually wanted to send them to London. However, at the same time, at that particular time, the Amravati marbles that were in Madras, they went deteriorating. They started to deteriorate. So, an Indian painter was commissioned by the EIC, P. Mudaliar, and he made some exquisite paintings of these Amravati marbles. Later, eventually, it was shifted to London along with these paintings. So, Indian government is taking claim not just on the Amravati marbles, but also on these rare, exquisite paintings. You also have the Indian government claiming ownership of Tipu Sultan's treasures and the throne of Ranjit Singh. All of these lying in different places across Great Britain. You have Tipu Sultan's treasure lying at this particular place, Powys Castle. Now you would know, or you'd probably recollect, if I tell you the name of the owner of Powys Castle, Robert Clive. Clive, the plunderer of India of sorts. Well, his castle contains the throne of Ranjit Singh, whereas Tipu Sultan's treasures are found in the different museums across Great Britain. So, what's the Indian strategy now? How are you going to get the Kohinoor? Well, the strategy is simple. Go for the lower hanging fruits first, and then after that, go for the prized catch. So first we go for the easiest targets, small museums, private collections, individuals and entities who would be more than willing to hand over our treasure, our heritage back to us. And thereafter, we go towards the larger institutions and finally reclaim what's rightfully ours from the royal collections. Now, going forward, to discuss the Amravati marbles, again, an exquisite part of our heritage. A series of 120 sculptures from the Amravati Stupa in Amravati, Guntur in the Indian state of Andhra Pradesh. They are made from Palnad marble and most of them feature tales of Buddha, of Jataka tales. Indeed, carry the very flavor of the soil of India in them. Again, they were shipped to London by the East India Company in the year 1858, and as I told you, that the paintings made by P. Mudaliar become of extreme importance in this context too. So, what's the relation between Kohinoor and India? What would it mean for Indians to get back the Kohinoor? Well, if essentially, it's just endorsing, it's fulfilling what Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore had said in 1903, that Indians need to be master of their own destiny, of their own history, and which would essentially mean that we would be embracing Indian nationalism rather than getting colonially patronized by the Britishers who have unlawfully got the Kohinoor with them. If you look at the recent trends from 1947 to 2014, Indian government placed 13 requests and managed to retrieve 13 artifacts from British museums that rightfully belong to it. Post 2014, there is a radical rise that you see. Since 2014 till this year, 2023, India has managed to retrieve 300 plus artifacts from museums across the world. A renewed thrust is being put in making sure that we claim what's rightfully ours and get it back to our homeland. In this sense, it becomes imperative to understand that it is not a knee-jerk reaction. It is something that the government of India has been endeavouring to do. Indeed, when you go forward and you look at it, this is the rationale that is being provided. That if it belonged to us and if it is somewhere else, then it should be returned to us. The right place, as rightly pointed out, for someone's property is with the original owner of that property. Now, this sentiment is in sync with the modern cultural trends. So you have these nations that are now staking their claim for what's rightfully theirs. Greece is chasing the Elgin marbles, Nigeria the Benin bronzes, and Ethiopia its sacred tablets. All of these point of contentions between individual nations and Great Britain. India adding to that list with its rightful claim of Kohinoor and the other artifacts that lie strewn across Great Britain. And now we come to the ownership dispute. Obviously, there has to be an ownership dispute when you're discussing something as precious as the Kohinoor. So you have a host of countries that stake claim to Kohinoor. You have India, Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan. Most recently, Bangladesh also has staked a claim to Kohinoor. So, there have been possible compromises that have been mooted from time to time. One of them included that you divide the diamond into equal parts and give it to the claimants. The other has been to build particular monuments or particular museums and give joint control to the countries. None of these was even remotely accepted by Great Britain. Great Britain in fact says that the status of Kohinoor is non-negotiable, to the extent that their former Prime Minister David Cameron in fact once said they are not having that back, referring to the Indians and this claim of Indians towards Kohinoor. Such is the British resistance towards handing over the Kohinoor. So at this moment, dear viewers, my question to you would be that our claims, our position, our standpoint of colonial coercion. Well, here's a small example. After the death of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who was holding the Kohinoor, you had the Britishers swoop in. Literally, Duleep Singh, the son of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, 7-year-old son, he was asked to hand over the Kohinoor, and then supposedly he was afforded protection. If this is not colonial coercion, well, I'd like to know what exactly is. On that note, dear listeners, before I sign off from this brief discussion on Kohinoor and the Indian claims for Kohinoor, please let me know your comments, your thoughts on whether this claim holds, what's the importance of Kohinoor insofar as Indian nationalism and rejuvenating it is concerned, and whether you would be open to the Kohinoor indeed coming back to India, and if at all, what would be the way forward. On that note, it's a wrap from Bhuvan Apurva Jha for Study IQ. Thanks for watching.